Welcome to our webinar on essential strategies for successful pharmacovigilance and post-market surveillance. I'm Jan Kugel, your host for today's session, and we are excited to have you with us as we explore the critical phase of pharmacovigilance that follows product launch. This stage is essential for ensuring ongoing safety monitoring and protecting the integrity of your products in the market. Our keynote speaker for this session is Dr. Manolo Ernesto Beelke, a distinguished expert in clinical research with over 28 years of experience. And now I'm pleased to introduce our co-host for today, Alex Pavlovich from Qualio, our events partner. Alex will be moderating the Q&A and discussion. So Alex, you can take it from here.
Thank you very much, Jan. Good morning and afternoon to everyone. It's great to see so many of you trickling into the session. So yeah, as Jan said, my name's Alex and I'll be our moderator for today's session. That means it's my job to receive any questions that you might have throughout the session and then pass them along to our expert speaker, who I'll be introducing in just a moment. So as Jan says, please use that Q&A box. We do have some dedicated Q&A time at the end of today's session, but if you do have a burning question or you want to dive deeper into something on a particular slide perhaps, just add your question at the bottom and I'll pass it along to Manolo at a suitable moment during the presentation itself. So we want today to be an interactive experience that's as rewarding and insightful as possible for you guys, so don't hesitate to reach out. So I'm one of the marketing managers at Qualio, who this webinar is brought to you by in partnership with Jan and the Quality team, so a big thank you to them for working with us. As you can see on this slide, Qualio is a leading provider of electronic quality management software for growing life science organizations. We're consistently voted the easiest eQMS to use, and we're trusted by over 650 companies, almost 700 now. And we do actually have some very exciting functionality designed specifically for pharmacovigilance and post-market surveillance activities coming very soon. We'll be launching that to the market in December. So feel free to find us on LinkedIn or reach out to us directly if you want to learn more. So with all that being said, I'm thrilled to introduce your speaker for today's session, Dr. Manolo Beelke, based in Hirscheid in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. Dr. Beelke is a global expert in life science with almost 30 years of experience. He specializes in aligning medical, regulatory, and commercial strategies to drive clinical success for his clients and customers. He has a PhD in sleep medicine, an MD in medicine and surgery, and he's led drug development programs and even successful NDA and BLA submissions. He's designed over 50 clinical trials, provided guidance in over 300 more, authored over 40 peer-reviewed articles. So all this is to say there's no better man to run you through what best-in-class pharmacovigilance and post-market surveillance looks like. So over to you, Manolo, please take it away.
Thank you very much. So let's start this journey by highlighting that's a journey. So when we are talking about pharmacovigilance, very often we are involved in this topic when we are starting with the product development. So during the clinical trials, we have always in the protocol already defined the rules, how we are collecting adverse events and how we are reporting them. And we have a specific dedicated team, whether this is inside the company or outsourced to someone else. But the important thing, one other key moment is when we're reaching the market access, and that the real journey starts basically when we are reaching the market, because the whole pharmacovigilance exercise is becoming more important when you touch the ground with the real world, when you are exposing an increasing number of patients with a product which has been tested before in a quite controlled environment in a very selected group of people. And therefore, that's the important thing to remember. The life cycle of a product is affected by requiring pharmacovigilance done thoroughly, ensuring that on one side the product is safe still, or that you have a good risk-benefit ratio, and at the same time that the company is perceived as someone who takes care about the patients and is therefore maintaining the trust patients have in this company and in the product by by knowing that there's someone taking care about that. Having said that, you see already that there is a complexity behind that. Therefore, the agenda today is an agenda which is already quite complex. It has 8 different topics which we will touch. But as we have only 45 minutes basically for this discussion, obviously it cannot be omnicomprehensive of all aspects and all details. Also the operational aspects on how to do things can not be touched so much in detail. But we will give more and we will focus more on the strategic aspect, on what is important to consider. We will consider also the regulatory framework in which we need to work, and how we will build the pharmacovigilance program, and we can ensure that it's a strong one. How the detecting and the prioritization of the different signals we will detect will happen. And we will then discuss some case studies to basically just to see how it works in real life. Also here, we will not go too much in detail for many reasons. So for confidentiality on one side with the companies and on the other side, because there's not enough time. And then we have the post-market surveillance as an overall approach, and what does it mean? How we can leverage technology in pharmacovigilance. Now, everyone is talking about AI, but there is more than AI simply, or let's say AI is a large group of many other tools which can be included and supported by AI. And then we will have the conclusions, takeaways, and the question and answer, obviously. During this journey of 45 minutes, please ask the questions whenever you need. So there's no problem interrupting and having a discussion in the meanwhile. You don't need to wait for the Q&A session. Nevertheless, there will be enough time just to address any other question which might come up at the end. So before we will start, let's allow us to get a feeling on what the audience is. So how familiar are you with the pharmacovigilance practice? It's the first poll we have, and the poll has not right and wrong answers. It's just to understand how the audience is. So are you more a beginner, so new in the field? Would you like to learn the first things? Or are you, sorry, an intermediate, it's basic understanding, or advanced, so extensive experience, basically. Let's give still some time so that everyone can click on the poll here. So we have 142 attendees. I think there is still time for everyone. Everyone should have the chance to say at least yes. So as we can see already, most of the people attending are of intermediate level, but we have an important group also of advanced experts, which will challenge me at this point, because, and that's interesting because, you know, in 45 minutes, someone would not expect to hear anything of new. Hopefully, I can surprise them, and there will be something of new also for the advanced group. So let's then go to the next slide and see what pharmacovigilance really is. So pharmacovigilance is somehow often a word which we hear. Someone prefers to talk about drug safety, but pharmacovigilance might be the most appropriate expression, because it's about the willing to be vigilant about something which is going on within the context of a drug, so within the pharmacological perspective. So, but what it is, first of all, science. Although it's very operational, it follows methodologies which are coming from the science and is addressing a very pragmatic issue of side effects or adverse events generally, or in a context where we need to be data-driven. And therefore, it is science in any way. It's not about opinion. It's not guessing. It's not questioning. It ensures at the end that the drug's benefits outweigh the risks. And that's an important thing, because a physician, when they are prescribing a drug, are always in the position that they need to decide, is it worth to give a drug or not? And if I'm giving the drug, are the benefits outweighing the risks I have? And as we know, any product we are providing to a patient, which is not a natural product, or not, let's say, part of the physiologic body itself, so if it's not something we would get within a diet, nutritional product, then we have always a ratio between risks and benefits. And that's the important thing which we need to figure out. And the other important thing is pharmacovigilance has to have an ongoing safety monitoring. So it's not just about reaching the market and then we are done. It's normally the life of a product starts at the moment it's reached the market, not before. Before we have more the pregnancy. When we are doing clinical trials, I mean, talking about clinical development, it's more the pregnancy we have. And then we have the birth. That's the moment when we reach the market access. And then we need to follow up this baby and the child up to the end of its life to ensure that it's not becoming a bad guy at the end. So when we are working in this context and we would like to achieve something, we need to consider the whole world, and we need to consider in this world the regulatory rules. So in the same way, we are living in a society where we have laws which we need to follow. In this same way, we have also in pharmacovigilance and in clinical trials, and for everything we are doing within a pharma context, we have regulatory bodies, which are the lawmakers somehow. And for us, the most important one are, on one side, FDA for the US market, and on the other side, the EMA and the EU at this point for the other market. But there are, of course, in each country, other important regulatory bodies which needs to be considered as well. For the simplicity of this task here, we are focusing on these two only currently, and we neglect for a moment that there are, to some extent, some local differentiations which needs to be considered if you are working in these contexts. For example, India and Japan and China. There are situations which are sometimes a little bit different. Not generally, because there is a harmonization process, and this harmonization process is also represented by the International Council for Harmonization, so ICH, which allows to have comparable data at the end, even with the different small difference between the authorities. So why is pharmacovigilance important? So first of all, we will have a real-time detection, the management of the adverse events, and the safeguard of the patients, of course. Then we have the regulatory compliance, which is ensuring the patient safety, and that all this is done within the laws, within the rules which are defined, which will help us on the company level also to avoid that we will have fines, and it will protect public health also overall and the company. And at the end, it will build public and industry trust, supporting at the end the long-term success of the pharmaceutical product and the company. So when we are thinking about pharmacovigilance, we are always focused on the product, but we need to ensure that we are not forgetting that each product is linked to a company, and the company is linked to an image. So we would like that the company has always a good image within the patient group, within the population of patients, but also within the healthcare providers. So we have three important components to do that. So one is the risk management plans, which identify and mitigate safety risks. Then we have systematic data collection and the analysis related to that, which allows then to have real-world safety insights. And then we have the signal detection, which ensures that we will be able to respond within a timely manner and address the adverse events in a prioritized way. So there's somehow a triage we need to do. So what is the risk management plan? Which is, we have in clinical trials, when we are developing a strategy, we have all these plans within the clinical development. But we have also plans beyond the clinical development. So one of these is the risk management plan, which you need to have at least when you're reaching the market, because you need to have a plan how you would like to address the potential safety issues. So you need to identify, know potential risks. You need also to have a pharmacovigilance plan, which describes the routine. So how you are doing things, who is taking care, when and what, and how there is a handover described. And you need to ensure that there is a risk minimization. So you need to put in place the steps to reduce and identify the risks. And all this together will then allow that the regulatory requirements are satisfied. So when we are thinking about adverse events, side effects, the big question is, where do we get these data? And there are some obvious sources, but others which are not always considered. So the first one, the most obvious one, is the electronic health records. So we have their comprehensive data from patient treatment and outcomes, so that's a good source in any case. We have the patient registries, which also is organizing the data in a good way. Then we have the pharmacy and prescription data, which are an interesting source, because it tells you what and will be described and how the medication has been used. Is then off-label use, for example, also. Then we have the clinical professional studies, which are the backbone, basically, of all these things. But they are relevant also as a reference for the post-marketing research, and they will be enriched with any clinical study you are doing there, even if it's only an observational study. But you could also think in post-marketing to run some interventional studies. Maybe you might wish to identify new targets or subgroups of patients which might respond better, or you might like to test some biomarkers or identify biomarkers which could help to address better the patients which can benefit most from the treatment, or which might be at a higher risk. Then we have the health insurance and claim data, which are also an important source. Another important thing is social media now, forums, customer complaints. All these sources are more difficult to capture, but they are relevant because sometimes a patient is not going directly to the physician and telling them, I have a side effect or there's something going wrong. And then, of course, the national and international databases. So the WHO, VG-Base, for example, the pharmacovigilance, the FDA's MedWatch, and so on. And then the direct adverse events reports, which we are getting from the healthcare providers, from patients sometimes. So what do you think is the biggest challenge, another poll here now, in pharmacovigilance today? Data integration across sources, managing regulatory compliance, or detecting and prioritizing signals, or resource and budget constraints? Some of you have more experience than others, but feel free also to base your answer on just on a perception, not necessarily on experience. Here, the question is more to understand a little bit where your challenges might be. Maybe we can address them in a more detailed way. So 50% were brave enough to respond. Let's see. So interesting also here. So detecting and prioritization of signals seems to be an important task, but more or less at the same level of data integration across sources. And indeed, these are the two biggest challenges for most of the people, because maybe they are not using a platform which is helping to integrate the data, or because there is not an optimal process in place to detect properly and to prioritize the signals. And all signals are treated more or less in the same way. Let's see if the slides I have prepared might address enough these two main topics.
Manolo, can I interrupt you with a couple of questions from the audience?
Yeah, of course. Go.
So it looks like we have a couple related to the risk assessment piece, which you ran through a few minutes ago. So we have one question, which is personal training, I'm assuming that means employee training, is that required to be considered within a risk assessment of a drug?
Training is an important thing, because if a person is not trained, how do you document that this person is qualified in doing these things? There are different ways of training, but the direct training at the beginning, for example, might be the best one. SOPs are also a form of training because the people needs to confirm that they have read them and understood. And then doing audits. Internal audits might help also to identify where issues are and where specific training might be needed. So training is important, but it does not solve your problem. It's just the basic to ensure that everyone has understood what needs to be done and to reduce the mistakes. Because if you don't have enough training, it's possible that there are gaps and things are falling between the seats. It's difficult that there might be very rough mistakes because you have platforms and systems which are guiding the people. But it's possible that, for example, a signal is not prioritized in the right way and therefore not handled within the timelines required. And so training is good. Having control instances is better, or both are good choices.
Okay, thank you. A second one about risk assessment. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this one. It says, if an organization is producing a drug by any other specifications, then is it necessary to perform a risk assessment, or can they use the risk assessed by the pioneer?
Risk assessment done by pioneer?
Pioneer, I think it might refer to perhaps a contract manufacturer.
A contractor, yeah, of course, you can outsource. That's not the problem. The question is only if the person is qualified in doing that. You can fully outsource, you can have hybrid models, you can fully insource. It depends on the company. I know companies who have fully outsourced pharmacovigilance. It's not a problem, as long as it is clearly described in the SOPs somehow. So you need to document that, and then it's okay. And the people needs to be qualified. That's the other thing. You can have also the primary physician or the primary contact person, or the qualified pharmacovigilance person, as it's called in Europe. You can have them outsourced.
Perfect, thank you. We've got lots more questions coming in, so I'll just pick one more before we move on for now. How do regulatory bodies or pharmaceutical companies define the threshold to determine whether a reported signal is worth investigating or not?
Yeah, that's it's difficult to address this question in general. I will try. So it depends on the product on one side and on the adverse events on the other side. So there are adverse events which are clearly defined as serious adverse events. There are then also sometimes adverse events which are already defined because you know that from previous studies that of special interest. And they are completely unexpected serious adverse events. So if you have a serious adverse event which has an impact generally on the health of the patients or on the health system, including death, of course, then it's something which you need to report in an expedited way and therefore prioritize. Does this address the question?
Yes, I think so. Thank you. I know we'll be covering reporting in a little bit more detail shortly. We do have another question from Walter, but we'll come to your question later, Walter. We'll resume the presentation for now, and then we'll come back to your question and answer any more. So please continue, Manolo. I just wanted to catch up with a few of those questions.
Please feel free to interrupt me, because maybe I'm forgetting to ask each time to if there are questions, but a question is always welcome. So now let's go on the way of the data collection, the quality assurance. So how do we collect the data? So the hallmark is that we need to collect them properly and to collect them all. We need to have a quality assessment so that we know that the data are and the sources are accurate, that they are reliable, and that they are up to date, which we are using. And then we need to ensure the high quality of the data, which we are analyzing, because only if you have high quality of data, we can have a good decision-making at the end. And to do that, we have here somehow a pyramid of sources we are considering. Well, the first is the adverse event reports, which are, as I said, the backbone, basically. Then we have the electronic health records, the patient registries, and any other sources, which I put here all together, which are from a volume potentially huge, but from the quality, they are require more control. Where the adverse event reports normally are of the highest quality, because there is already a streamlined way of reporting, and there is no big interpretation. In other sources, there are also, for example, literatures. Sometimes you have case reports of something, and you have adverse events reported there. And then you need to check if this is already reported, or if there's anything new. So should all adverse events at this point? That's another poll. It's an important question, because it addressed many of the questions we had partially responded, most likely those questions which will come up. Should all adverse events, including lack of efficacy, be reported during post-marketing surveillance? Yes, all events must be reported. Only serious or unexpected events. Only those related to product failure and worsening conditions. There is a strong group with 86% for the A. So I think that's the answer, I think, is quite clear. So almost everyone is convinced that yes, all events must be reported. It's true, yes, all events must be reported, but there is a distinction. If you're talking about lack of efficacy or worsening of a disease, there is something we need to say. Because first of all, we need to define this properly. And the other question is, we need to report all events, but in which time frame. So the question is not so much if we need to report them all, but what are the timelines we need to consider? And the timelines are completely different. So, and there are also, to some extent, some differences for those events which have not high priority. So if it's a serious or an unexpected event, we are reporting this like in clinical development within 15 days. If there's a death, we are reporting this within 7 days. So far, so good. There's not a big deal. For all the others, we have normally the regular reporting, and here we have some difference. So in Europe, it's enough if you have a yearly reporting, and in the US, they are asking for quarterly reporting for the first year, and then later they are reporting this on a yearly basis. Yeah. So then the question about lack of efficacy. What is lack of efficacy? Now, if we need to report this with a priority or not is depending on what the lack of efficacy has as an outcome. If we have, for example, a product for hypertension, and the patient is not responding to the hypertension, basically the hypertension is not changing, then we have a lack of efficacy. But if there is no harm to the patient, there is no risks, there is no hospitalization, there is no death, there is no important risk for the health system at all, this is not a situation or an event we need to report urgently. So we can easily report this in a yearly update. If we have, however, a situation which we call worsening of the disease, so you have a natural course of a disease, and the patient treated with a product which normally should slow down this discourse, instead of slowing it down, it speeds it even up, then we have a worsening of the disease which is beyond the natural disease course. And then this would be considered as a serious adverse event, or an unexpected unexpected event in any unexpected serious event, a serious unexpected event. So, and then you need to report this with high priority. And this will have also an impact on the benefit-risk ratio, basically, if you have many of these. Questions here?
I don't think we have any questions on this particular topic, Manolo. I think we can move on for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, advanced events reporting timeline. So this, we have discussed this already. You have summarized this in a slide so that you have that. All events are reported. So there's a variation of the timelines we have. Yeah, sorry, the FDA is quarterly for the first 3 years, not the first year. And so that was a mistake from my side. And then we have the format. So we have the individual cases which are reported and the periodic safety reports. Yeah, ultravigilance and FAIRS are the two systems. That's the only thing which might be added here. So signal detection. Let's start with the basics. So where we get the signals. So as we said, so we have a fishbone diagram, which is quite nice. So we have the unexpected adverse events on one side, increased frequency of known adverse events. We have demographic specific signals, growth rate. We have the potential drug interactions, the cumulative adverse events, the off-label use signals, the retail sales, but we have also cluster signals, comparative safety signals, product quality issues, and trends in the real-world data, if you are doing a real-world data analysis. So how do we detect these signals? So there are techniques which are using, so they're called data mining, which are allowing to use specific sophisticated algorithms and software to analyze big data, so large data sets, and also different type of adverse reports, electronic sources, bring them all together, and they help them to identify patterns, correlations somehow. They help you to create hypotheses. And sometimes there are even, and that's interesting, patterns and correlations which you might not see with your eyes, but which exist because there are statistical calculations behind. And then in addition to that, and together, there is a statistical analysis. And the statistical analysis helps you also to apply specific tests at this point and to emphasize more if there are trends which are evolving over time. You can model then these data. And you can also establish if there is a medical relevance beyond the statistical significance you might identify. And you can see to which extent there is the reliability of this signal. If there is a return of the signal and the signal is not just an outliner. And yeah, and then you can do the clinical review, which allows that an expert is taking a look to that, focusing even more on the clinical relevance on that, and integrating all the systems. So the important message is here that despite the technology available, and despite the software and the sophisticated software available, there's still the need that there's a clinician understanding the topic, reviewing these data. So the statistical analysis and data mining helps you a lot to analyze a huge amount of data and shorten the time frames to get results, but it does not necessarily allow you to get the clinical meaningfulness of these data, which have been found out. And also here we have somehow a stepwise approach. So we have the data collection, the data processing, the data mining, which is coming, the statistical analysis, the signal validation and the clinical review, and then the documentation and reporting at the end. As you see, this is a process which somehow needs to be described in your plans. And at the end, you communicate all this to the regulatory. Signal prioritization, and that's addressing the questions you had. So there are factors which are identifying to which extent a signal needs to be of high priority or low priority. And the factors which are influencing that are severity, frequency, the preventability, and the reversibility. They are defining to which extent it's critical and it's high priority to address a specific adverse event you have observed. And high priority signal require immediate action, obviously, and sometimes also that the label is updated, and or that you make a recall. So if you have a product on the market and you have death, which you should not have, then you might need to recall this and understand, first of all, why all this happens. And there's a case, for example, for natalizumab in the treatment for multiple sclerosis, which it was a very, or is still a very effective drug, maybe the most effective at all. But for the monoclonal antibody mechanism it had implied, it had also given space to death. Death related to an inflammation due to a latent virus which could activate itself. And once this happened, the company needed to recall the product, take it from the market. They analyzed then the issues, found then what the issue was, defined a safety strategy, and with a safety strategy and a black box label, they went back to the market. And the patients at this point, informed about the risks, but knowing also the benefits, could take an informed decision whether they would like to take this risk or not. So that's an example on how this could work. Signal management. So here another example. So let's assume you have an identification of increased rate of liver toxicity, let's assume, in a post-market surveillance. At this point, we detect the signal, we validate the data and the causality related to that. Are there cases related to the drug or other factors? So that's a big question. It's always, and sometimes time of occurrence of an event is not necessarily giving you the causality. Most often, yes, but not necessary. And you will do then a detailed data analysis, expert consultation as well. So you see also the clinical review is already embedded here. Then you will have a risk assessment and potentially modify the label with warnings, dosage recommendations, and so on. Severity frequency analysis is included in that. Then you have a communication with healthcare providers to let them know what happened. And then you will have a proactive and detailed focusing on patient care by giving this information to the patient at the end. And you will continue to monitor and follow up with that. And as we said before, if it's a serious adverse event or an unexpected adverse event without a death, you have 15 days to make a fast reporting. If there's a death, you have 7 days to do that. And then the follow-up reports we'll do in 15 calendar days, sorry. Yeah, and that's following then good pharmacovigilance practice, of course, and yeah, the global standards, so ACH, E2D, and so on.
Manolo, can I interrupt with a question, please?
Yeah, please.
While we're on the topic of signal detection, I've got a question. What intelligence platforms have you used to gather real-time, real-world data?
Yeah, there are some intelligence platforms. There are the big players like so Arcos, Viva, but there are also smaller ones which are also good. Some are more specialized on Europe, others are global. So there are many platforms you can use. So I would not like to make so much advertisement for one or the other one. Each of them has advantage and disadvantage. All depends also of the size of the company, how many people are working there within pharmacovigilance, how much is outsourced, and yeah, so it's not a big problem. So if there's a specific request, we can specifically on a specific company, if you like, that's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. I think we can move on.
Yeah. So therefore, ways to minimize the post-market risks, and these are the frequent internal audits. We are talking here about also about the training programs at this point, as we mentioned before, the rapid response plans, so another plan you need to have in place, and the stakeholder engagement, which means also health care provider. So now the big question: what if you make everything wrong? Now, if you make everything wrong, you have a problem, because the risks are fines and there can be heavy impact. So you should ensure that you are not getting any fine. And to ensure that, it's very simple. You can also face the risk of a withdrawal. So if you're not compliant, the product can be suspended, or revocation of marketing authorization can happen. You can have some damage of your reputation, of course, and you can face also specific extra scrutiny by health authorities at this point. So for anything you are making later on, so it is a good advice to have good plans, and then everything is going right. So if you follow the rules, there's no fine. If there's no fine, there's no withdrawal, no reputational damage, and there's no scrutiny. So if how should we do that in building a sustainable pharmacovigilance program for a new product? So there are basically 4 steps, if I recall right. So the proactive safety is the first one. Then we have the collaborative surveillance, which engage with stakeholders for data collection. And then we have the continuous education, so which included the training. And the 4th is the integration of advanced technology. And here we are going then again to the platform and what else we can do to do that. This can be done, as we said before, in also completely outsourcing. So that's not a big problem, as long as the plans are describing that. The question is also who is owning the data. So you need to, in Europe, or if you're working in Europe market, GDPR is important also, how personal data are handled, and how the auditing is done. So if you are subcontracting the auditing, who is doing it, when it's doing, what is the timelines, and so on. Have your quality management system inside? Are you outsourcing the quality management system? And so all this needs to be described somehow. So how can we enhance the pharmacovigilance product of existing products? So also with ongoing training, expanding the data sources, adaptive risk management. So adaptive risk management means that you're adapting the situation in relation to the risks which are changing. So you can have a product which has a good safety profile when it's reaching the market, but during the life cycle, you discover that the product is not as safe as you thought. And then you have enhanced reporting protocols. Yeah. Which technology do you think will revolutionize pharmacovigilance the most? So we have artificial intelligence here in this poll, the real-time monitoring tools, automation for routine tasks, and the big data analytics. So artificial intelligence is quite in vogue, but it's good that the poll is showing also that there are relevant, important other things. So I think there is not a true and false response here. There is more a response which is an expression of where people are focusing currently. So if you would have asked this question 5 years ago, no one would have said, or few would have said artificial intelligence, simply because artificial intelligence was not so developed. But at this time, although we are talking a lot of artificial intelligence, we should remind ourselves that artificial intelligence is not very intelligent normally. And it's artificial, that's clear, but it's a program. It's still a software which needs to be trained. And the quality of artificial intelligence is highly depending on the models on which it's trained, how it's trained, from whom it's trained, and on what it's trained. And so the results can be very, very difficult. So the take-home message is the best thing you can do is an integration of all these things. So the automation of routine tasks is a critical element. It was more important in the past. It was seen as a high-end task. It still is important, but it can be integrated with artificial intelligence, can be also still taken separate from that. The same is true for this big data analytics. So big data analytics can be taken as a standalone, but they can be also integrated with artificial intelligence. And the same is true also for the real-time monitoring tools. So some years ago, real-time monitoring was done with humans mainly, but in real time, with some software helping to analyze and trigger signals. But today you can integrate this with artificial intelligence. So none of them are working best alone. They're working best if you consider them all together. And that's the point where we need to go to the next journey, which means leveraging technology in pharmacovigilance. As I said, so AI and machine learning is for sure a key element nowadays, but it's generally only the starting point, because if you have this and you are not considering big data analytics, you are running short. It's not enough. And the same is true also if you're doing big data analytics without real-time reporting. So these things are going hand in hand. One thing is big data analytics post-hoc, so looking to the past. One other thing is combining this with something which is looking to the future and to the present. So real-time reporting can be done also integrating modeling, for example. You can see and anticipate if a signal might become more important in the future, simply because more people are exposed, or because you are exposing a different population to what you have exposed in your phase 3 trial, for example. And then at the end, the automation of routine tasks is becoming an important thing, because if you have all these data, you need to automate the routine task, because only then you have at the end the outcome you wish, which means a faster, more cost efficient, and a more reliable pharmacovigilance. So AI-driven signal detection, what is important? So data scraping from those core sources which we have mentioned at the beginning is important, of course. Then the predictive analysis can be done very very thoroughly by an AI if you give them the right model and you train them properly. And this is important because you can anticipate risks, and therefore you can take actions before you can protect your company and the product. Then natural language processing, which is a feature of AI, is also helping within forums, HRs, other social media, and other sources, also literature research. It helps you a lot to scout and screen these sources to identify the right signals. The real-time continuous monitoring can be done also by reading the reports and everything you get. And the ranking, that's also an important feature. You can do with the rights properly program, you can do a good signal ranking. This programming should be done under guidance of a physician and the clinician to make it meaningful from a medical perspective. So, cross-border pharmacovigilance. Now, so far we were staying on internally. So we were thinking about what pharmacovigilance can do internally. But the important thing is that we have an environment and we have a product which normally is covering the whole world. So a global compliance is needed at this point. We need to ensure that what is working in one country is working also in another one. And this requires that you adhere to a global standard. And you are therefore satisfying the needs and the requirements of different markets. That the data collection is consistent, that you have harmonized this data collection through a specific plan at the process. You need then to ensure that all this helps you to mitigate the risks across all markets, independent from the country and from the population. And this requires that you have tailored risk strategies for each single market at one time, and also globally. And you need a collaborative global reporting system. And for that, you need partnerships with international regulatory bodies, health organizations, and transparent and efficient data sharing at this point. So, best practice for the signal detection. We have, I think the question was already there. Is it possible to combine data sources, feeds, to integrate them in one system? Yes, of course. And that's the multiple data sources which we need to integrate. It's, I would say, a must. It's mandatory to do that, to have the high quality. And the prioritization is also an important thing. And we have seen how to do that. And the collaboration, as we said in the slide before, and the reassessment from a regulatory review perspective is the other critical element. Let's now take this all together and focus on another case study. So let's assume that we have a company which has detected a potential signal indicating an increased rate of cardiovascular events, which are associated with one of the products of this company. And this has been discovered during post-market surveillance. So we have here the steps. We have, again, the investigation, the validation, the proactive label update and communication, the implementation of risk measures, the ongoing monitoring and follow-up, and how we are doing that. So if you take the same step, we have then the pharmacovigilance team, which is conducting a detailed analysis, first of all. And then they confirm the causality and involving the consultants potentially with clinical experts, which might be external or internal, depending on the company. They will then update the label and will eventually include warnings. They will inform healthcare providers and do all the things we did, and will tell them that the potential cardiovascular risk exists, ensuring that the patients and the healthcare providers are informed about that, and that patients at risk will not be exposed. Or if they are exposed to this, that the exposure is better monitored and well informed. Then you need to think about if other risk minimization strategies could work, if educational material needs to be prepared for that. And if a continuous monitoring is required, in most of these cases, it would be. And you put this in place and track this, any new cases and trends, and then you change again. So you are adapting the risk mitigation based on what you are finding. So I have here on 2 slides now the emerging trends in pharmacovigilance. One is the predictive safety monitoring. So the more we can use AI to predict the future, the better it is, because it helps ourselves also to take proactive actions before it happens or before we have a worsening. And personalized medicine. Everyone was talking for years now. I remember when I started in pharma, they were also talking already about personal medicine, but it was more focused on thinking about identifying the right population of subgroups for a better treatment effect. And it's true, but it's also true that there might be patients in which a specific product might not be the best choice. And identifying them can help you to personalize medicine and to reduce the harm, and therefore increase also the benefit-risk ratio. Because the less patients you have which have a safety issue, the better this ratio is for the product. And this is an advantage for the company. Other things are real-world evidence. So real-world evidence, many years again, we are talking about real-world evidence. There are many ways to do that. One way is also to think about pharmacovigilance. So real-world evidence means also what is the real safety profile in the real world. And it's not only post-hoc analysis. It means also that you could start specific studies which are helping you to monitor and to collect these data in a more systematic way. Or you have maybe phase 4 interventional studies in post-marketing conditions, which are using also to feed the knowledge about the product, maybe in another indication or in another, in an off-label use or in whatever. And then automation and robotic process automation is also something which is, it's very trendy. Overall, it helps you to do less manual work, basically, and to do it faster and to reduce the mistakes. But don't trust too much your software. Also, softwares can do mistakes. Also, AI can do mistakes. So don't trust AI. That's an important, I would say, take-home message. So what are the challenges and solutions of pharmacovigilance? We discussed them already before. I just highlighted them here again. I put here 4 things together. So integration of data from multiple sources is a challenge, and there are solutions. We have discussed them. Navigating different regulatory requirements across regions is a challenge, and we have addressed them. Managing high volumes of safety signals is a big challenge, and we have addressed them. AI can be a solution for, or a partially solution for that. And having internal limited resources is also a problem. So often we are talking about technology, but the question is, do we have enough people also? Is the staff, is the size of the staff adequate? Have we enough trained staff? Do we need more staff? Do we need outsource? Is there a need for training? Takeaways. So I have 4 takeaways here. First one, establish a robust pharmacovigilance program. Everything you have defined and planned properly with a smooth process is a good start. Use advanced technology, but don't trust technology too much. Technology cannot replace a person. Technology is like a hammer in a craftsman hand or in someone who doesn't know how to use a hammer. What you can achieve with this tool depends on your capabilities and your qualities. But it can help you. Can help you a lot to identify a signal very early. It is very sensitive and it helps you not to overlook. Integrate AI, machine learning, big data analytics, and this can help you to enhance the efficiency of your process. Then regular updates of the risk management strategy is important. So the risk management strategies needs to become adaptive. It cannot be that you have a risk management plan at the beginning, you reach the market, and in the 10 years, it never change. It's just impossible. So, and now we have puzzle time. I thought we have some, so I have 6 words which I would like that you remember, which are critical for your work. And that's why I have created crossword. Let's start with the first one. What do pharmacovigilance programs assess and manage to protect patient safety? Any idea? It's number 1, cross. What could this be? Right, it's risk. So we are assessing risks. Then, what continuous activity ensures? Oh no, let's take the 2. What is detected to identify potential safety concerns in pharmacovigilance? It's a signal. We are detecting a signal. Now let's try this number 6. What must be maintained to meet regulatory standards and avoid fines? Oh no, was it 3? Sorry. 3 is far. What is the primary focus on pharmacovigilance activities? It's safety. Now let's take the 5. What continuous activity ensures that pharmacovigilance teams is updated with best practice? It's what has been asked at the beginning. Oh no, it was 4, sorry. 4 was which technology helps enhance real-time and monitoring signal detection is AI. 5 is then training. And the last one, number 6, what must be maintained to meet core regulatory standards and avoid fines? Compliance. So I hope that you remind these 6 words: risk, signal, safety, AI, training, and compliance. And now we have another poll, which is just trying to understand if anything of this webinar, although it was short, was of value for you. Which part, from your perspective, was of the highest value? The signal detection and management, building effective pharmacovigilance programs, understanding regulatory timelines, or leveraging technology for pharmacovigilance? Come on, a little bit more we can do. 92, 95, 94. So 104. Okay, so let's. So we have here 56% signal detection management, followed by building effective pharmacovigilance programs. If I recall right, these were also the 2 aspects which where most of the challenges have been perceived. So this means then, if this is the case, then that although we had few, only a short time frame, at least partially we could address the challenges which have been faced. So now we have question and answers. Any other question, any other answer I can give you?
Thank you, Manolo. That was a really great presentation. We've got about 20 minutes left to handle questions now, and we do have some which have been stacking up over the last few minutes. So thank you everybody for sending those in. If you've got any more to add in the next 20 minutes, then please do, and we'll try to get those answered as well. So first question is, what are the basic parameters that need to be considered during risk assessments for pharmacovigilance for a pharmaceutical company?
The important parameter to assess the signal detection. Sorry, could you repeat that?
What are the basic parameters for a risk assessment for pharmacovigilance?
As we said before, the severity, seriousness of event, how often you see this, the outcome at this point. These are the classical parameters you're using to prioritize.
Can it ever be acceptable not to investigate a signal from the market?
If you know a signal and you don't evaluate this, I would say that's a big problem. Signals should be detected, and you should do efforts to identify them. So even if there's a signal and you don't do any effort to identify the signal, so you don't know that there's a signal, it's already a problem. At the moment you know that the signal and you're not analyzing it, it's even a bigger problem. It shows that basically you don't care. If this is the question, I don't know.
Yeah,
You need to ensure that the patient is safe. Safety first, always. And therefore, it's critical to do everything you can. And if you cannot do this internally, you need to outsource to ensure that the patient is safe when you reach the market and for the whole time the product is on the market. And that's why it's critical that you have the plans, because if you have an audit, the first thing an auditor will do is checking the plans. What is your plan to ensure that the patient is safe? It's not done with a good safety profile at the moment you reach the market. And in Europe, for example, they're specifically asked for a risk management plan. You need to have that. And the higher the risks are, the more they're insisting on that. They might not give you even market access without that.
Okay, thank you.
But as I said before, it all depends on the product. You know,
The next question is, sounds like a very specific use case for somebody, but we'll see if you can answer this one. It says, if a drug's research is done in the UK, but an organization in Asia is manufacturing the drug using the same formula, how is it possible to mitigate any adverse effects because the clinical trial was done in a totally different climate? So I think this is around what you were talking around a global strategy for pharmacovigilance, perhaps.
So let me try to understand this. So you have the manufacturing done in Asia. The pharmacovigilance team is based in UK, and the company is in UK. The product has been developed most likely in Asia and has got approval for European market, I suppose. At least that's my interpretation of the situation. If this is the case, then you got market access, and the market access provided has given you already, has reviewed also the manufacturing aspects and the quality of the manufacture and so on. And I'm assuming at this point that it is fulfilling all European standards. Therefore, the problem that it has been developed outside of Europe apparently has not been perceived as a problem for the regulatory if you got access. But at the moment you are reaching your market in Europe, you need to have a post-marketing surveillance strategy to ensure that if anything might be unexpectedly different, that you identify that. So you can handle the product, and that's okay. Now, let's assume that my assumption, my interpretation is wrong. You are still in the clinical development. Then my higher recommendation is, I highly recommend then that you run a clinical trial also in Europe. You can go also to Eastern Europe, which is then less expensive. But it should be in Europe, or you should at least partially have some patients included in an ongoing study with some sites in Europe. So you can then make group analysis maybe. You can foresee that. And then you will not face issues at the moment you are asking for market access. That's the other scenario. And then also here, you need to do your pharmacovigilance surveillance once you reach the market.
Okay, great answer. Thank you. Got about 10 more questions and about 15 more minutes, so let's see how many we can get through. Do we need different data sources for different vigilance activities related to signal detection and signal prioritization for patient reports?
So you have two populations of patients from which you're getting information. Is this the starting point of the challenge?
I believe it's does each different vigilance activity require a different data source? I believe that's the question.
No. No, not necessarily. You should combine as many sources as you can. No.
And the same person has also asked the question, this is Manal, hope you're still with us, Manal. What are the challenges of having multiple sources for signal management?
Sorry, what challenges have?
What are the challenges of having multiple sources for signal management? How can you integrate
The structure is
multiple
different.
sources?
So multiple sources have different structures. And if you do this manually as a human, you compensate that. It's not a problem. So you go to social media and read, and so it takes, however, a lot of time. And you need to have a huge staff to do this, to cover all these things. Or you make literature research and so on. You can do, there are some tools for doing only literature research, for example. So you can do this separately. If this is maybe also related to the question before, you can use different sources and use them separately. But the question is how you are integrating all this information. Because at the end, you need to have a consistent report, which is reporting the risks. You know, you can say we have identified in source X these risks, which has not been described before in our safety profile from the phase 3 study. But then we have found from another source that there are also these risks. Now, the question is, how are you integrating that? Are these completely different populations? Are these different patients which have generated different signals? Or are these the same populations and all these are relevant together? And that's what you need to find out. And in this situation, a platform which is able to communicate and integrate all these things together so that you have at the end a huge pool of data in which you can do big data analysis, data mining, statistical analysis is a huge advantage. There is not any amount of money which can countervalue this advantage to have all sources together in one platform. And as I said, there are some Flex Global. There's also there are I think Capra. There's one that's called Capra also, and so on. There are many providers for multiple source integration. Mm-hmm. Some of them even integrating already AI, so you don't need AI outside. And that's good. And AI should be also, as much as possible, specialized in pharmacovigilance. That's the other thing. Taking a general AI does not help you a lot. So it might help you in writing maybe, but not necessarily in the analysis.
Okay, great answer. Thank you. So the next question is, how good is the FDA's adverse event reporting system database for real-world data?
It is limited to what is reported there. That's what it is. That's why it's wise to integrate it with others. So in the FDA, you will have all the information which has been reported through US physicians and also from companies who are working outside the US. Of course, they will report as well in the FDA and in the EMA dataset. You might not find signals and sources from literature, social media, forums, patient registries, so on. Even from the WHO, you might not find them necessary, if not reported directly. You know, that's a big problem. It does not exist once. It would be nice if we would have one database for everyone globally, where everyone is reporting, but that's not the reality. Everyone is reinventing the wheel somehow, and it makes a little bit different. The structure is a little bit different.
That brings us on to our next question quite nicely, which is there a specific reference for reporting adverse effects in specific medical terminology?
Yeah, you use the normally the major terminology. You have all the standardization already. This is all in the tools also. You make also an harmonization by that, by classifying this properly, by someone who's coding them properly. So as per preferred term, and then you need to harmonize that. So the reporting done by the physician not necessarily is fulfilling that criteria. So you need to, that's one of the steps. But also here, machine learning can help you a lot on that in most of the cases. And then you need to have at the end a medical who's reviewing if the coding is correct.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering all these, Manolo. We have a few more last few minutes now as well. Are there any general differences between standard pharmacovigilance activity and pharmacovigilance for rare disease drugs?
So a rare disease, that's an interesting question. Thank you for that, because pharmacovigilance has always, from the beginning, one big challenge. And the big challenge is the small number effect. So when we are running, and we see this significantly during clinical trials. So if you're running a phase 2 trial or phase 3 trial, we have often situations that we are comparing one observed adverse event related to the drug, potentially related or probably related to the drug, with some other thing which is happening maybe in a placebo group. And we have often situations where we have one patient here, 2 patients there. And the question is always, is this a signal or not? In most of the cases, it's not necessary it's a signal. It's all depending on if there's some systematic approach. And for rare diseases, we have the big challenge that in addition to that, we have very few patients. So these trials are, for the needs they have, are based on specific regulatory agreements, which allows to run clinical trials with a very small number of patients, often only one trial, because you don't need as a second one, at least for the normal agreement you have. And then also from a statistical point of view, there are often many compromises which are accepted, which would not be accepted for an indication where you have a large population. Now, the big problem is here that if you have, let's say, 100 patients, you have very few adverse events, most likely, but you have single events here and there, most likely. And so there is a difference. So in the meaning that a rare disease has more challenges in identifying a real signal. And it's an advantage, if you like, to some extent for reaching the market. It's a disadvantage in understanding if something is going wrong. So, but the rules are the same, basically. The rules for pharmacovigilance are the same, but the context is different. And the possibilities to identify them are also reduced because the patients are few. And often you discover then the full safety profile once you're reaching the market and you treat them all. That's how it works normally. But on the other side, this risk is accepted because it's outweighed by a huge benefit. So if we are talking about rare diseases, often we are talking about situations where we have the first treatment ever for these patients. And therefore, anything which can help their life or prolong their life or change the disease course from dying early to surviving for a long time is something which makes the risk always acceptable.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got time for maybe one more question. And Ilya says, thank you for that perfect answer. So thank you, Manolo. So we've got, I think this might be an interesting question to perhaps end with, depending on how long it takes for you to answer, Manolo. But if an organization is at the initial stage of developing a PV strategy, what's the very first priority to be considered? What's the basic initiative to make the strategy successful?
Okay. Very early stage of defining the pharmacovigilance strategy for me, who are involved in developing clinical development strategies, means that you are at the latest after phase 1 or phase 1b. So you are thinking about designing the phase 2 study. That's for me the early stage. That's the moment where you need, at the latest, think about it. Ideally, even before, honestly, because when you're running a phase 1 study, you have already some ideas about the mechanism of action, what could be the potential risk. You are not just, let's see what happens. So if you are at the phase 2, the starting point is designing not only properly the phase 2, but thinking already, what else do we need to reach the market? So you start with creating a team, or you outsource it at the beginning, depending on the size of your company. Most of my clients are startups and mid-sized companies, and they are therefore at this stage outsourcing it. And then at this point, once you have defined which model you follow, insourced, outsourced, hybrid, you define the plans. So, and with the plans, you define the SOPs at this point. So you are defining the structure. Who is doing what, when, and how. And once you have that, you define the pharmacovigilance plan, the risk management plan, and so on. So these are the things. And then you train these people on these plans, if they are not already trained, or if they're not senior and they know this already because they have written these plans. But a scenario could be that these plans are developed because it's outsourced by the company to whom you have outsourced that. And at a later stage, when you are then I don't know, maybe you are deciding not to have an early exit to reach the market, then you will have one day an internal team because it might be more cost efficient. And then you take these plans and the SOPs over, or you adapt them to your own. You have time to do that at this point. Important is that you have everything clear in mind when you're reaching the market.
Perfect. I think that is a good note to end on, Manolo. We have about 1 minute left. Jan, would you like to say a few words? And a big thank you to Manolo for that great presentation and for answering those questions there. Thank you.
Yes, Alex, thank you very much. So, on that note as well, I enjoyed the presentation very much. I want to thank Manolo for joining us for this event. Also, a big shout out to Qualio. Thank you very much for doing this event with us. On this note, I want to thank all of you for coming to this event, and I will see you at the next one. Thank you, Alex, Manolo.